I kind of got the camera at an odd angle, but I wanted to kind of show you from the way I'm working from, so we can go over some basics on how to upsize this little pattern. This is not my pattern. I've never taken credit for it. The only thing I did in the video was show you how to use it and create the little baby dress. I could create a pattern like this, and I think after talking to my mom, I could actually make some improvements on it. Mama came over today and went over a lot of the basics of pattern making with me. And I learned some new things, and I also learned that I was doing some things right, which I was a little surprised about. What I'm going to talk to you about is how to upsize this pattern and how to do a few other things with patterns. This one, you can see it's for 0 to 3 months, and this is kind of the end result that you get here when you create the little dress. You get the something about that looks about like this. Yeah, I believe I did it exactly from the pattern. So one of the first things is this sleeve was created a little differently, and the person who made this pattern, maybe she just kind of came up with her own way or whatever. It works okay. What I did find though, when I created this little dress and I put it on my little granddaughter Peyton when she was about 4 or 5 months old, was that it fits really awkwardly at the neck. It's not terrible, it's really hangs off the shoulders. The neckline isn't really ideal for a baby. I mean, it just looks baggy no matter what you do. If you make it too tight, then it's really difficult to get it on. So, you know, there's some things to keep in mind if you decide to make that little dress. Like I said, it's not awful. It's a cute little dress, and I made little bloomer pants to go with it and put it on Peyton. But one of the first things when you're upsizing this pattern, one thing that my mom told me is you never work from here. And I don't know if in the video I did for upsizing it, I think I increased it this way. And if you're doing it all around, I think you can do it that way. But if you just want to make it wider, you don't want to do it from this side. You want to do it from this side. You wouldn't do it from the fold or from the cut of the middle. So, alright. Now, don't laugh at my awkward drawing here. I was going to print it out, but I found a little drawing of an infant body online, but my printer's almost out of ink, so I had to draw it. When you're measuring the baby, to figure out your measurements, you want to decide where you want the neckline. And if you're doing one like this little dress that's going to have an elastic neckline, of course you still want to take that in mind, but you want to add enough seam allowance and enough width to create a decent casing for the elastic, so that it's not too tight and it's not too loose. And you would measure down, you know, my mom said from your neck to wherever you want the neckline to be, however low you want it to be. Then of course you're going to measure across the baby's bust this way. And then you're going to measure the waist. And this little dress ends up having what you call a free waist, because you know it's way wider. It's not going to fit the baby snug. But you still want to measure though, take those measurements so that you know. And the waist is usually somewhere around the belly button. And then you want to decide the length, which is basically for a dress from the shoulders down to wherever you want it. If you want it to come above the knees, or if you want it to be a blouse that comes below the belly button, or if you want it to be a ankle length dress, you would measure all of that, and you would take that in mind from the shoulders to the bottom of the dress, adding a seam allowance all the way around. And my mom tells me that she usually does a 1/2 inch seam allowance, and for clothing. She also designed furniture and sewed cushion covers and things for furniture, and she said that the basic seam allowance for that was 3/4 of an inch. So, and I usually do about a 1/2 inch seam allowance, because it gives plenty of selvage to, you know, neaten up the edges with a serger or zigzag stitch or whatever you're going to do. And if you were making a a top or a dress that had, instead of the elastic, if it had a bodice to it, you know, with this, you would measure the shoulders from the neck to the right at the shoulder. You would want to measure the width of the arms all the way around from one side to the other, and then it is almost kind of a guessing game. Now, my mom's 72 and she's been sewing since she was a young teenager, and she said it's kind of the same with her. If she upsizes a pattern, it's a guessing game. So you really have to keep in mind here that if you had a 1/2 inch seam allowance, this is what you would have left over. Sorry about that. If you had a 1/2 inch seam allowance and you were doing the casing, of course you'd have a little more because you need a fold over and all that. So maybe 3/4 of an inch for the casing. The rest of this is the measurement that you get for the width of, half the width of the sleeve, or 1/4 of the width, because you're going to cut this on the fold. So then you see that example there, and you would try. It's a lot of it is a guessing game, guys, and you have to guesstimate, which is a cool word for saying I'm guessing it, but I'm also hoping I get it right. So, you know, that's kind of hard to measure, but you want to figure out the depth you want. If you're doing a sleeve, this sleeve for this pattern, I'm not trying to make the person who created it look like she didn't know what she was doing, but you cannot get a puffy sleeve from this, from what my mom tells me, because in order for it to be puffy, you're going to need a lot more for gathering it. And that's what would make it puffy, poofy, or in this case, the elastic would. But it's just a really small sleeve, and you're not going to get a whole lot of poofiness out of it. So you would need to add some up here and some around here so that it can be gathered and it looks a little more full. But basically, I think what you would do to increase the size of this is you're going to come out over here and add whatever you need. And I'm not, you know, giving any measurements because I've been asked, how do I upsize this? I don't know who you're making it for, and I don't know what their measurements need to be. So it is kind of difficult. I can't just say, here's how you do that. But you would want to make some changes here. You want all of this to be a little bigger. If you want the sleeve to be a little puffier, poofier, you can bring it out here a little bit, but my mom says if this is a pattern where you're doing a fixed sleeve instead of like gathered or elastic, you don't want to mess with this side seam here because your increase won't be right. And you can make it a little longer because this will actually be the bottom of the sleeve that's at the bottom of the arm. You can make it longer to give it more length. And then you would want to, whichever one you use, you can do it on the dress piece or you can do it on the sleeve piece. But then you want to cut this one out and use it as a guide for how to, you would cut this piece out and use it as a guide for the piece that you're going to make to increase the size of the dress. So, I don't know how well I explained that, but what I'm going to do is, I learned a lot of things from my mom today. She was here for about a little over an hour. We were talking about pattern making. And her suggestion was to suggest to you guys and gals who are learning from my videos and want to learn to sew and create your own patterns is always have basic patterns around for things you want to create. This is not really basic because it's a definite design, like a, you know, the little top, and the dress bodice would be good for creating a different size bodice. But have several different kinds of patterns around, and you can use those patterns to create your new patterns. And it's like Mom was telling me, that you watch how they manufacture patterns, graduate the size, how they increase it. You kind of follow their lead to create what you need to create. But you always, if you know who you're making it for, take your measurements, you know, get all the measurements for everything you need, and then work from that with your manufactured pattern to kind of get an idea. You can't, I don't really think anybody can just start off creating their own patterns. They need to see how other people have done it before, and you learn from that. So this is a pretty decent little dress pattern, but you know, my mom has been doing this for a while, and she said that's just, it looks more like something for a doll. It's not made for comfort. It's not, there's not enough detail in it. I don't know how to say it, but you know, this is just a basic pattern. So you can make improvements on it with the way you do the sleeve, and you know, if you want it to have some width. You don't get those poofy little round sleeves, you know, from making the sleeve piece rounded. That's not going to happen. What's going to happen is you're sewing on a circle, and you're going to have, it's going to look awkward. You have to start with straight edges and figure out how much gather you want in that sleeve to get it poofy and rounded like that, and that's how you do it. So I hope that made sense, and like I said, I'll be working on a video series on creating patterns, and what I'll do is, this one was just kind of a quickie because I had so many requests for how to increase the size of this pattern. But what I'm going to do is do a series, and each pattern that I create, I will make a garment from it so that I can show you guys the end result. If I mess up, I'll show you that too, so that you don't make the same mistakes I did. But if it turns out great, then that's even better. So I hope that was a little bit helpful. That's just a little quick tutorial on upsizing this little peasant dress pattern. Peace, y'all. Bye-bye.